is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Dewbs & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, 6 o'clock, 10 days before Christmas, so stay with me while you get ready for your office party and I'll give you some interesting things to talk about over the nibbles. First tonight, Prince Harry has been awarded £140,000 in damages for the distress caused to him by the Mirror newspaper group, listening into his voicemails to a modest extent 15 to 20 years ago. I too was a victim of this, but I chose not to seek damages, and I'll explain why this is all about Harry's ego rather than his privacy. Plus, there are currently 5 or 6 times the amount of anti-Semitic attacks that we normally see in the UK, according to the CST. Tribal, religious conflicts are as old as time. But have we learnt nothing? How do we build bridges between people at a time when they are literally and metaphorically on fire? And obesity is costing the NHS £6.5 billion a year, with roughly a quarter of all adults and children now clinically obese. But with Weight Watchers and our own former Health Secretary Steve Barclay saying that weight loss injections are the way forward, do you, like me, despair? Have we given up on the idea of taking responsibility for your own health and doing the hard work required to get fit? Plus, reports that the government is considering some radical things about limiting social media use for teenagers. Isn't this up to parents to police? Are they simply priming the next generation to have no privacy whatsoever online? That's all to come. I want to hear from you this afternoon, this evening. I nearly said morning. I'm normally on in the morning. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. First, though, here is the very latest news with Sam Francis.
Bev, thank you very much. Good evening. I'm Sam Francis. The headlines at 6. As we've been hearing, Prince Harry has said it's a great day for truth and accountability. That's after he was awarded more than £140,000 in damages over phone hacking claims against the tabloid newspaper group. The High Court has ruled that there was extensive phone hacking by the Mirror Group newspapers between 2006 and 2011. In response, the publisher says they apologise unreservedly for any historical wrongdoing. The judge also said journalists were involved in phone hacking at the time Piers Morgan worked for the Daily Mirror. But the former editor claims he was never involved in phone hacking or told anyone else to hack a phone.
As for him saying this is a good day for truth, the Duke has been repeatedly exposed in recent years as someone who wouldn't know the truth if it slapped him around his California tanned face. He demands accountability for the press, but refuses to accept any for himself for smearing the royal family, his own family, as a bunch of callous racists without producing a shred of proof to support those disgraceful claims.
Well, elsewhere, the grandmother of a British schoolboy who went missing 6 years ago has said she can't wait to see him when they're reunited. French officials who have been working with UK police say Alex Batty should be able to return to his family in the UK tomorrow. He went missing in 2017 after going on a family holiday to Spain. Detectives believe he was abducted by his mother to live an alternative lifestyle abroad. Here in the UK, police say there is no evidence of third-party involvement. That's after a body was found in a river during their search for a missing mother of three. Gaynor Lord went missing in Norwich last Friday. CCTV footage was released showing her leaving work. Norfolk police say the body hasn't been formally identified, but her family have been informed. The force says it remains open-minded about the circumstances of the 55-year-old's disappearance, and they'll continue to pursue all lines of inquiry. Tributes have been paid to a woman who's died in an explosion in South Wales. 40-year-old Danielle Evans has been described as a whirlwind of a woman by her family, who said she would be deeply missed. Police say there are no other reports of any serious injuries, and investigations into the cause of the incident at Treforest Industrial Estate are continuing. This is GB News across the UK on your TV, in your car, digital radio and on your smart speaker. Now, though, it's back to Beth.
Very good evening. Welcome to Dewbs & Co with me, Bev Turner, in for Michelle Dewberry this evening, my last show of the year. So joining me until 7 o'clock, my panel, PR consultant Alex Dean and former Labour advisor Matt Larser. I want to hear from you this evening, GB Views at gbnews.com or on Twitter, X at GB News. So our first story this evening, Prince Harry has today won damages of £140,000 against Mirror Group newspapers. A High Court judge said he was a victim of unlawful information gathering. The Daily Mirror newspaper apologised unreservedly. Now, gentlemen, I have a dog in this fight. Yeah. Alex, you're also very interested in it because obviously you work in PR and still work in PR. You have an understanding of this. I was hacked around this time as well. Now, when we say hacking, what we mean is there was a lazy journalist about 5 o'clock on a Friday, would sit in his office and he'd ring your voicemails like this and he'd try and you just get through. Now, I knew at the time that they were doing this because a journalist tipped me off and said, look, you're on the telly a bit at the moment. My husband was rowing the Atlantic at the time, and that was why they were seeing if I was having an affair with anybody. My life was so boring. And I was approached by the police to say, you are on this list, and do you want to claim damages? And I said, no. Why would I? And they said, because you must be traumatised. And I said, but if they listen to my voicemail messages, it's literally my mum saying, I'm in Sainsbury's, do you want more nappies? I couldn't fake the trauma to get a few £100,000 off a newspaper group for something that was, in my mind, Alex, not that serious.
You didn't feel like it was intrusive?
No, because I've been told...
a lot of people felt very differently. Yeah,
but I would dispute the fact that Harry didn't even know this was happening. I wasn't in the royal family. I was just a TV presenter, and I had a tabloid journalist say, change your code on your phone and they can't listen to your voicemail messages. The idea that he didn't know this was happening and he couldn't have protected himself very easily.
Well, I think he probably would have retrospectively realised when you look back and you think, this story broke and... oh, yeah, somebody did talk to me about that at the time. And then there was that story, but it's only in hindsight that you realise those things. And, of course, there was the major payouts. Like Sienna Miller, you remember, got right at the beginning of this stuff. But the most alarming thing from this story for me is that the hacking went on even to an extent during the course of the Leveson inquiry into phone hacking. That's the most extraordinary thing. People felt so entitled to go and abuse other people's privacy and other people's telephone systems that they continued to do it even while there was a judicial investigation.
You see,
I don't think it's light at all, actually.
I have to say I'm with Piers Morgan on this one. Piers Morgan's been saying what Harry doesn't know about the truth. Like, the idea that Harry is fighting for privacy...
Sorry, I don't mean to hog the airtime, but that two wrongs don't make a right. Yeah, Prince Harry can be a clot, and it can also be completely wrong to hack his voicemail.
The idea
and lie about it.
But the idea, Matthew, that he's fighting about his privacy. This is a man who has a camera crew that follows him around day and night and broadcasts it on Netflix.
I think there is some irony that Prince Harry is taking the case, and that he's the one who's also, frankly, questions to ask for his security at the time, because obviously he's now fighting about whether or not he gets a particular level of security. At that time, he had the highest level of security, and you know, it shouldn't just be physical security. People should obviously have been looking at his electronic security as well. I mean, I wasn't hacked, but I had lots of friends who were. You know, so there were several friends who've got the letter from mostly from News International, publishers of the Sun, with the apology letter framed in a few bathrooms.
And did they get money?
And they got money. Yeah, I mean, they got sort of 10, 20,000.
I'm an idiot, aren't I? I've got friends who have whole conservatories.
Yeah, I was going to say, and it's known, isn't it, in sort of media and politics, it's known as the kind of conservatory payout, because a lot of people got a conservatory or a new bathroom out of it. That doesn't take away from the fact that some people did find it very difficult, and obviously, if people were less boring, as you would put it, but wholesome, we might say, then obviously their lives were intruded into, and it was wrong that they were doing it. And as Alex says, doing it so late, that's what really shocked me, is doing it while the Leveson inquiry was still going on.
I think we have to be really clear about what this is. This isn't a van at the end of your road with a listening device like something out of Scooby-Doo, going in and listening to your live
It's the modern equivalent of that, though, isn't it?
No, I don't think it is.
It's very basic.
We could all do it to each other's phones now.
Most of the time, the reason it worked was that people hadn't reset their phones from the factory setting.
1, 2, 3, 4.
That's right. So there was a code you'd put in. I think the area where it does get difficult was the Millie Dowler situation.
Awful.
Because that was difficult, because this was a girl who'd gone missing, and in order to get involved, effectively, journalists hacked into Millie Dowler's phone, and that therefore confused the investigation, and they thought it was her accessing her own voicemail messages.
The reason.
That lesson, I think, has been learnt, though.
That's the reason I don't object to Prince Harry being the person who brings these cases, because cases are brought by people who have the wherewithal and the will to bring the case to court, but the behaviour they're seeking to call out doesn't just apply to them. It applies to a plethora of people, and it will apply to many people who are bereaved, who have no money, who don't have the ability to instruct expensive lawyers and take a case like this. So sometimes someone like Prince Harry, and he's gone through months and months of criticism at the highest level in our media for doing so, brings a case like this, and you know what? He won. Loads of people were saying he was going to lose, and it's a bit of a humble pie time, I think.
I think the thing for me as well, though, is the fact that it's such a long time ago now. I mean, this is what...
I think we can be assured it's not happening because nobody uses voicemail anymore, isn't it? So this is at least that...
That's right. And it's for me, it's not systemic surveillance. I'm much more worried about a camera on every street looking at our faces at the moment, so we're effectively living in an open prison. That kind of surveillance bothers me enormously. This is one guy. When I saw the piece of paper with the notes on, when they sat me down in the police station in Putney, and it was all very serious, and was I OK, and did I need a glass of water? And there was, like, daisies doodled in the corner, and they went through, whose number is that? It's my mother. Whose number is that? It's British Gas. You know, and it was like, are you OK? I'm fine.
But some people had more traumatic experiences. I mean, look, I agree. I think what we...
But what? How traumatic can it be?
Well, if they're having an affair or something...
Well,
hang on. It's quite easy to construct a way it's more traumatic. It was your mum and the gas person. But in your example, your then husband rowing across the Atlantic.
Yeah.
Let's say you got a voicemail saying something terrible had happened and you'd gone missing. You know, of course, thank goodness, in the end, it turns out you're OK. But, you know, they break the story because they got hold of the story of your husband's disappearance from your voicemail because somebody who works in the tracking team, looking after him, they can't get hold of you, they're desperate to find you. Please call me back, we can't find James. Now, there's a story, and it's highly intrusive. So even in your example, I can construct quite easily situation. You know, your mum's very sick. Please call us as soon as you can.
It's very persuasive, Alex. I have to say that is very persuasive. I just wonder whether anything, because the judge said, Justice Fancourt said today about the fact that Prince Harry, the stories were largely trivial. that's kind of the point in his case.
Yeah, but they still shouldn't have been doing it. And I think the good thing, at least, is it's the last hurrah of that sort of tabloid journalism. I mean, a mixture of things like the voicemail doesn't, nobody uses their voicemail anymore.
Yeah.
But add to which the massive decline of the tabloids, not least because of all the phone hacking payouts that they've had to endure, means that hopefully this is the end of that era of tabloid journalism.
Like most people, I hate it when someone leaves me a voicemail. It's a real pain.
I have a voice note that says, don't leave me a voicemail.
But the point is, when the person hacks your phone, they don't know that what they're going to get is trivial. It could be really profound.
I guess so. And that is a very convincing idea, I think. That is a very convincing argument, Alex, that there might have run something. But surely in that situation, if my husband had gone missing at sea, wouldn't they have then called me and said, do you know your husband's gone missing at sea?
They might do when they're ready to go to print, but they might do it just before and therefore beat their rivals by a day. Or let's try another example. The hospital calls you and says, Michael's brother, sister, cousin is sick. We can't get hold of him because he's on the ocean. How do we get in touch with your husband? Right? And so that's the story they get. They get our hero rowing the ocean, Jamie Cracknell, is going to have this terrible trauma when he comes back, but he's not going to know for a week because he's out of touch.
Yeah.
And they get it from your phone.
Yeah, it's very convincing, I have to say. I think it's just that with the passage of time and looking at Harry, it feels from his point of view. Let's criticise him instead of me for being wrong. The passage of time...
We always like to have a bit of a go at Prince Harry. It's always good for a Friday evening.
Harry is... you feel like the motivation for him is what? It is spite. It is
I mean, he would
power.
like to see the tabloid press closed down. And actually, there is an issue. Mirror is part of a company called Reach. They just had to sack a whole load of journalists because their revenues continue to decline there, and other papers like the Express, the Star, and lots of regional papers. So I think there's a fine line to be drawn between kind of driving the tabloids into the ground and seeking redress for what was quite clear wrongdoing, which should be punished.
There's another point to this story, though, given you are talking about Prince Harry, which is this is a time before he had children, before he was married, when he was quite famously sowing his wild oats. But even he was entitled to a private life in that sense, and the people who would be in touch with him certainly were. And I can imagine there might have been young women telephoning Harry from time to time who had not signed up to have their names all over the papers, but the papers would have loved to have got hold of it via a voicemail. So that could be really quite damaging to a girl at university age, sort of thing.
Absolutely,
as he was then.
I mean, it was quite traumatic for those who were named, who was sort of girlfriends at the time, who were longer, not through phone hacking, but just through going out with him. But if you had just sort of been on one date or met him once or something, and suddenly your whole life changes, and all via a voicemail potentially. So yeah, I think victims, really were vulnerable.
I agree. And on your point about how long it's taken, it would have taken a great deal less time if the people responsible had fessed up immediately. It would be much easier to deal with phone hacking if they said, you know what, here's what we did.
Yeah, and that's actually something that's going to emerge now, is because, as we said, with sort of my friends just found their name on a list. Sometimes sometimes it wasn't absolutely clear if they had or had not had their phone hacked, but they potentially had. So in that case, the newspapers rolled over and just sent them a cheque, and they agreed out of court. So effectively, you didn't have to do anything.
Did they not know at the time, though, your famous friends? Can you give us some names?
No, because I don't think they were.
I mean, who are your famous friends?
I'm not going to. It's not fair to say, but I mean, one of them was a press officer at the Labour Party. But
oh, really?
Yeah, absolutely. There's that kind of level of
quite dull.
Yeah, I mean, but they wanted to, on Tony Blair at the time. This is at the end of or Gordon or whatever. So therefore, they thought they could get it via things like that. So it was kind of people, operatives in politics, who were being targeted, not because they were exciting, but because the people they were trying to look after and work for were. So it's very strange, as you say, Alex, that it's taken so long in these instances. So there are lots of questions for the Mirror.
Look, the people who did the hacking know who they hacked, right? That would have taken a bit much quicker if they said, you know what,
here's the list.
Here's what I did.
But
the back of those notebooks with the doodles, there's a list.
But you see, you get paid for the damages for your emotional distress. And I think I have a real problem with people taking legal cases just to get some money out of it. Were your friends genuinely emotionally
They didn't really tell me. I think also at the time, I think people were so angry about it that it was just that they thought it was intrusive. And frankly, it's a bit like sort of slipped on a chip, isn't it? And the people were just presented with a list and said, it's not going to be a massive problem with your life because they fessed up. I think that was the issue. They weren't going to have to go to court. And frankly, in the case of one of the, I can see the letter frame now. Mr. Murdoch could have afforded the $3,000 that paid for the new bathroom or the new conservatory. So I think it's let's not remember it was wrong. It may not in all cases have caused huge damage, but in all cases it was morally and legally wrong.
Well, look what you've been saying at home. John has said, God, this guy's so boring. I think he means Prince Harry, not you, so don't worry. He needs to get
our coats.
He needs to get a proper job. So much for wanting a private life, entitled Lazy Prat. Dave says £140,000 is not enough after all the press assassination he and his wife get. He does kind of ask for it, Dave. I mean...
No, he asks for attention. He doesn't ask for his voicemail to be hacked.
Yeah.
Well, true, but today he asked for nothing but attention on his terms, is what it seems to me. I've tried so hard to be on their side, Harry and Meghan, but I find it increasingly difficult. Richard says, nobody cares about Harry or celebrities getting hacked. Big up to you, Beverly, for not taking an easy payday over principles. Total respect. Thank you, Richard. Some days I do regret it when I see my friends' lovely conservatories. And Emma said, phone hacking is terrible. I didn't want Harry to win because I don't like him, but it's good that he did win, really. People are seeing the principle of this, Alex.
Yeah, absolutely. Even if Harry's not, you're not Harry's #1 fan, you can absolutely see the principle, as we saw.
Newspapers have changed, though. The newspaper industry post-Leveson, I think, has changed enormously.
Well, so you say, and I certainly hope that's right. The fact that some people were still conducting hacking during the Leveson inquiry implies there was a cultural problem here that wasn't a one-off, was it?
Which do you think is worse? Being doorstepped by a journalist knocking on your door, or them listening to your voice messages?
I think the voice messages, because you still have the ability to close the door and say, I'm not talking to you if someone doorsteps you.
Yeah, absolutely.
If the doorstepping
gets out of order,
I'm not in favour of that either.
Yeah, I mean, doorstepping's not great, but I mean, at least as you say, you can always close the door, and you can, if it's really intrusive, they can call the police, and you'll have a policeman outside. I mean, especially if you're, a member of the public is sort of vulnerable because of a crime or something, then the police will look after you, which obviously they weren't. And you know about it. The key thing is, you know that somebody's knocking on your door or ringing your parents to try and dish the dirt. You don't know if they're using surveillance techniques like phone hacking.
So I think your viewer is spot on, because part of the point about the law is that if you only believe in people winning because you like them, then you're missing the basic point of a court sitting and hearing things. In fact, the principle could be more powerful and more profound if you're willing to say, I don't like that person, but I still think this court decided the right way.
June has hit the nail on the head at home. She says, if Harry didn't worry about his family when he publicly wrote and spoke about confidential conversations and personal details, and he didn't get their permission to do so, so he's a hypocrite.
I said two wrongs don't make a right.
That's good, though, isn't it?
I said two wrongs don't make a right at the start, right? And I'm not a Harry fan either, but I'm glad he won today.
Yeah, OK.
Agreed.
Right, thanks, guys. Good start. Coming up, Hanukkah decorations and menorahs have been damaged and vandalised in London. Do we need to do more to tackle anti-Semitism? Why is it on the rise, and how do we reduce it? Don't go anywhere.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GBNews, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Dewbs & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good evening, it's 6:22. It's Dewbs & Co with me, Bev Turner, tonight. Keep me company until 7 o'clock. PR consultant Alex Dean and former Labour advisor Matt Larser. Right, so Hanukkah celebrations across North London have been targeted in a spate of vandalism against festival lights and verbal attacks against Jews. Anti-Semitic attacks have skyrocketed in the UK since the October the 7th attacks. So do we need to do more, do you think, to educate ourselves and others on the evil of anti-Semitism, Matthew? Because it wasn't something that I was ever aware of growing up. I grew up in a very Jewish area of Manchester. And of course we know about Hitler. We knew about the war. That was of a different era, a different time. People didn't think like that anymore.
People thought it was over, didn't they? I mean, yeah, I mean, pretty much every school kid does the Holocaust quite rightly at school, and I hope that it is every school kid. And I think the government must be congratulated because it's announced, I don't often congratulate the government, but it's announced extra money in the autumn statement for the Holocaust Memorial Trust and the Community Safety Trust, which sort of provide security for Jewish events and Jewish celebrations. But these, I think what we need to do, actually, is make sure that as a society we're having a conversation about anti-Semitism, which isn't just about the Holocaust, but is about today. Because, as we've seen with these shocking, images from North London, but I think lots of people are reporting, they put up a missing poster from one of the missing posters from the people that are still hostages, the hostages still held by Hamas, and they get ripped down. Even if it's not actually against a Jewish target, we've got the river to the sea. It's just becoming... I was on the phone to a friend earlier who was walking through Hackney and said it was just sort of taken back. Every third house has got a sort of £2 million houses have got the big signs outside them saying ceasefire now. So people are just feeling very uneasy. And I think what worries people is what we saw comedian and writer David Baddiel say before all this happened with his book, sort of Jews Don't Count, which is sometimes we can have double standards. That we sort of expect there to be attacks on Jews. And yes, we condemn attacks on the community as a society, but we sort of build in an expectation that it's going to happen in a way that we wouldn't if somebody's attacking Christian or Muslim or Hindu targets in quite the same way. And that's what worries me, that we seem to think, it's horrible and it shouldn't happen, but we expect it to happen. It shouldn't happen, and we need to work to ensure it doesn't happen.
I remember interviewing a fairly sort of high-profile member of the Jewish community on Britain's Newsroom one morning, and he was talking, this is months ago, this is months before 7th of October, Alex, and he was talking about the rise in anti-Semitism being a problem in this country. And then we went off air, and I said to him, is this predominantly an Islamist issue? Are you talking about attacks that are predominantly from Muslims? And he went, yes, but we can't say that.
Yeah, we've imported a problem. There's definitely a part of that.
Can we say it now?
Well,
Can we say it now?
You and I are saying it, that we have imported a problem where people come to this country from somewhere else, and instead of accepting British values of tolerance and belief that all religions are valid and none shall lead to your persecution or abuse, believe that they're going to bring the values that they had where they were and insist that we accept them. Well, I'm afraid we don't. But it's not just Islamism. Let's be clear. The Metropolitan Police shown this destruction of people's religious iconography, said we're keeping an open mind as to why this was done. I mean, honestly, if this had been a mosque that had been smashed up or something outside a mosque, immediately people have been talking about Islamophobia. It would be the front page of every newspaper. Everyone would be condemning it. But Matthew is right. People expect the Jews to take it, and Jews don't count. The only thing you and I disagree on I think if it was a church, no one would pay much attention to it. If it was a Christian symbol, people would be saying, oh, well, this is a person with no mental health issues. It can't possibly be anti-Christian. There's nothing to do with that. Jews and Christians are just expected to take this. And I'm afraid that, especially with what's happening in the world at the moment, that they shouldn't. Jews in this country are afraid to walk down the street, and certainly afraid to walk down the street if they're showing any a symbol of their faith. And I think that's terrible.
And you know what? And there'll be Muslim people watching this tonight who are like, hang on a minute, Bev, we're not all like that. And I think it's really important to point out.
It's a problem within a community.
It seems so obvious, but I want to say that just to be clear.
Look, I think because Israel is the only Jewish state, and what Israel does is sometimes controversial. We may all have questions about how far they're going in Gaza. You're not saying that nobody... Equating a condemnation of anti-Semitic attacks with a blanket support for Israel is just nonsense. It seems to me we don't hold every Muslim person in Britain accountable for what the government of Iran do or the government of any other Muslim country do. Why should any Jewish person in Britain be held accountable for the actions of the Israeli government?
Absolutely right, and nor do we hold all Muslims in this country responsible for the actions of a bigoted few.
Totally.
But that it is and of course there are people who can claim generations back in this country who are anti-Semitic and on the much celebrated in this country far right. But it seems to me that this is in significant degree a problem within Islam.
Yeah, it does seem to be, and that is why we see on our streets every weekend we've got the pro-Palestinian marches and we've got the pro-Israeli marches, and it does feel like...
March, singular, I think they had
March, they had, well, certainly the pro-Palestinian marches have been louder, angrier. Biden himself, President Biden, came out and said that Israel are running the risk at the moment of losing the support of various nations because of the bombing of Gaza. That he even said he's now looking disproportionate.
And I just, for my political family, for people on the left, I may be a moderate on the left, but people, across the spectrum, what worries me on social media, people on Instagram, who don't realise that what they're saying about Palestine and the issue. I believe in a two-state solution. I believe in, Israel has the right to defend itself, but needs some restraint. But this absolute they're not understanding that when you say certain things, which you may think are in a good cause, that you're not thinking about other people as well. And people need to have the conversation that, it's not a football match, it's not tribes, it's a complicated situation, and they need to think about the Jewish community.
I agree, but when I see governments in the Middle East hurling homosexuals off buildings or hanging them or jailing dissidents, I don't feel an inclination to go down and smash up my local mosque.
No.
Right? Because I don't make the connection for one moment between the acts of that government in the Middle East and the people who live in my country, who are fellow Brits, and happen to share a faith with the people who've done those terrible things. And that's, to me, appalling. But I want to say one other thing, which is very interesting. This is statistically a trend that's not about Muslims in this country, it's about British people as a whole. A generation ago, or even 10 years ago, polling showed that people were far more sympathetic to Israel than they are today. And now there's a very negative perspective on Israel amongst younger people. Now, that's not just to do with what's happening in Israel at the moment. It's a long-standing trend. And it does, in part, relate to a lack of education, because people don't understand the reason for the existence of the state.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and it becomes trendy to be anti-Israel and pro-Palestine.
Well, Sharon has got in touch and she said, I'm a 61-year-old English Jew. Even as a 5-year-old back in the 60s, my mother told me to be very careful about who I told that I was Jewish, as there were people out there who hated us. Things have not changed in the UK at all. That's got to be a little extreme, hasn't it? They have changed, surely.
Well, there was
until now.
Yeah, but I mean, we haven't mentioned the anti-Semitism in my own party under Jeremy Corbyn, which was the darkest days in the Labour Party's history.
I was being kind to you, Matthew.
Absolutely, you were, Beth, but
now you brought it up.
No, I'm happy to bring it up because things have changed, and it's one of the good things that Keir's done. Whatever anybody thinks what else he's done, he has. A lot of people have been kicked out, and a lot of action has been taken. And I went to the Jewish Labour Movement conference last year, and people were just absolutely delighted. Lots of people coming back to the Labour Party, but it does remind you how if you let, it's that famous phrase, isn't it? If you let evil get in any way a foothold, if good people stand by and do nothing, and that's why. I mean, I was here on Saturday in GB News on a show, and some Jewish staff members were in, and we just had a little lighting of a menorah moment. We had donuts. One of the guests, Jewish, said a prayer, and it was and it just felt great to stand in solidarity. So I would say to anybody who's disgusted by what we've seen, if the Jewish Museum in Manchester's been reopening, is brilliant down the road from where you grew up, in Cheetham Hill, and people should just go and have a little think, maybe take the kids, just have a conversation, because that's what's key, is that we all have understanding.
You wonder, though, you think, is it, I'm just, as you're saying that, I'm wondering whether we now, because we have so many religious schools now, so that lots of communities have been allowed to set up a Jewish school, a Muslim school.
But there's communities and communities.
We've segregated.
You know that at a service in the United Kingdom, when Jews go to the synagogue, they sing the national anthem. It's part of the reflection of the fact they're part of this community. And to state the obvious, it doesn't happen in some other groups, nor does the attitude that reflects happen in other groups. I also make the point that Britain's Jewish population is vanishingly small. Right? It doesn't have the electoral weight of that reflected in other groups, which is far more significant and has influenced to a significant degree the positions taken by politicians in Westminster over Israel-Palestine, because they're feeling the electoral...
Absolutely.
They're
physically feeling it. People are standing around paging outside their offices and hounding them.
So my point is, we're in some trouble here. We've got in a situation where we allow our country to regard a vanishingly small minority that's got nothing to do with what Israel's doing. They're not deciding what Israel does vis-a-vis Palestine, to be seen as the proxies for people's anger.
Totally. And it's the naivety, Bev. It's the naivety of people, sort of young people, particularly sort of liberal young people, who think they're being pro-Palestine. I mean, the irony is the Queers for Palestine section of every march, when every single one of those people, their love would not be legal in either the West Bank or the Gaza Strip. But nobody thinks through it. It's just because it's trending.
You're a queer for Palestine. If you were there, they'd kill you tomorrow.
Hashtag be kind, right, folks? So, as the CEO of Weight Watchers admits that they got dieting wrong, Oprah Winfrey says that she's taking drugs now to keep her skinny, these diet injections, and an airline is giving free seats to obese people. Have we forgotten how to take personal responsibility for our health? Don't go anywhere.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 till 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, welcome back to Dewbs and Co. It's me, Bev Turner. Tonight, while Michelle takes a night off, with me until 7 o'clock, PR consultant Alex Dean and former Labour advisor Matt Larser. Right, fellas, this is a bit mean talking about this when we're about to eat ourselves into a stupor over the next 3 weeks, but obesity cost the NHS a whopping £6.5 billion a year. And now the CEO of Weight Watchers, which is now called WW, I presume it's that and not were. I don't know. They've admitted that they got it wrong when it comes to dieting, while their ambassador, Oprah Winfrey, has revealed she uses weight loss drugs. The Hollywood star also dubbed obesity a disease. Is it? And in an era where you can take drugs to ward off craving carbohydrates, should we be taking our own health more seriously? Also, the other bit of this story is that Southwest Airlines, American airline, they've been accused of rewarding obesity with a new policy that grants very overweight passengers free extra seats. We're in a big mess, really, Matt, aren't we, on this when it comes to weight? Because we've got the body positivity movement saying it doesn't matter what size you are, you can be beautiful at all sizes. And I agree with that. I think you can be beautiful at all sizes, but your insides are going to look rubbish and your heart's not going to be good. You're going to have a fatty liver.
You can be beautiful at all sizes,
absolutely,
but it impacts your health. There's no way of escaping.
So how do we square that for the moment?
I think that these weight loss drugs may be a huge part of the answer. I don't think we should shy away from it. And I think we shouldn't think that they are they're an alternative to people's responsibility, because even when you use them, you have to take responsibility. Carol Malone, often sat here, has taken them, talks very openly about it. I got all the goss and detail from her in the green room one morning. But they're not... And she still has to be very careful about what she eats and take responsibility.
Yeah, but they're not side effects free.
No, they're not, and that's why you have to use them very carefully and properly. The only thing is, anybody who invested shares in the... It's a Danish company, and it's now basically the company's worth more than the Danish economy, because people think that, particularly in the US, their use is just going to explode.
I find that so depressing, Alex. It feels like we've just given up. We've said to the corporations, you can just advertise, you can just feed. We can go into every restaurant and the meal is the size that would feed a family of 5.
Sure.
And we've got crisp packet machines on every train station platform. You've got buy one, get one free on the most unhealthy food. And now we've gone, fine, the drugs companies will save you. Just take an injection, eat what you like.
I think it's amazing how we fall for certain things, and you're talking about falling for advertising in that sense. This story is Weight Watcher advertising. They have a new product on the market. They're pivoting their business strategy. They're going to move into a drug regime now. And Oprah Winfrey, their brand ambassador, has a product to sell.
Yeah.
And my God, they're great at landing their story, aren't they? Here it is in the newspapers, and here we are, because of the newspapers, discussing it. And, you know, in the end, you've got to ask cui bono, who benefits? And the answer in benefiting is Weight Watchers do. They're going to benefit from selling this new drug because they've seen their numbers, I imagine, fall away of people doing their routines because so many people are using the drugs. Yeah. So now they're getting into the drugs.
Yeah,
that's right.
Absolutely. And the support for people who are taking the drugs as well, because you do have to continue to have support. It's not a kind of magic bullet and you're sorted. You have to be on the regime. So they're therefore with services, which is the new buzzword of corporate speak.
Yeah, but you say you've got to exercise self-restraint, but the whole point of the injections is that you don't want to eat the foods, right, that you fancy.
Yeah, what you have to do is you have to eat certain foods, and you have to eat in a different way. I'd be sort of smaller portions, but more often. I think we should.
An appetite suppressant as well, though, isn't it? So you're less hungry.
Yeah. So sometimes one of the things about being responsible when you've taken them is you have to force yourself to eat and make sure that you don't not eat. So that's part of the responsibility, because obviously you're going to run into health problems if you're not getting the right foods and getting the nutrients that you need.
But there is no.
So it's not a responsibility-free zone.
But there is also not a side effects-free zone when it comes to drugs.
No.
Every single drug can have potential side effects.
Yeah, and the idea that we should mass medicate people because they can't control their own appetite is a silly one. Look, it's a very unfashionable view these days, but in any free society, the number of fat people is going to correlate very closely with the number of people who've chosen to be fat. Because, like me, they eat and drink too much and they don't exercise enough. I'm certainly not preaching from any sort of moral superiority here. I've got a spare tyre because I like to eat rich foods, I like to have a drink, and I don't like to work out very much. Now, I am aware of those things, right, and it is for me to fix it. Now, if there was a pill that would fix it with very few consequences, I'd probably take it.
Would you take these drugs?
I don't probably won't.
I don't want to give them to you because you're not too slim. But...
Well, that's very kind of you to say, but I would take a pill if I thought there was no consequences. But I'm like you, and I think actually there are some consequences. But a side effect of the consequence is me thinking it's no longer up to me to be responsible for my own body.
Yeah, mentally. In terms of mentally what we're doing, I mean, you know, I'm going to, as my kids will say, you're deep in it, Mum. But mentally, what we're doing to humanity by saying, don't worry, it's not your responsibility
But there are lots of people who tried everything.
It's like a spiritual vacuum. I'm really going to deep it, Matt.
No, there is.
It's a spiritual vacuum that we're filling with food.
Yes, I agree, but just think about those people. Yes, and that's actually a lot of people when they look at controlling their eating is looking at their values, looking at the pressure they're under and the emotions. That's a big... But there are lots of people who've tried everything and who, for medical reasons, you know, I mean, you know, when we were kids, it was glands, but actually there is truth behind it that some people are just naturally larger.
A very, very small
minority. Absolutely, but for them, this drug is going to be revolutionary.
Eating too much, drinking too much and not exercising enough.
But it does. But I think everybody has an emotional relationship to food. Everybody, whether you eat
totally.
to reward yourself, or even if you don't eat because you have an emotional relationship with food. Like we all have that. I think we neglect. We've kind of we've given up on contemplating that, aren't we? No one thinks about that. We don't talk to kids about that.
Well, I think also, we don't teach kids to cook in schools very much anymore because we think other things are a priority. You know, and also because we're told things are now low in this or low in that, we think we can have it. But we don't actually realise it may be low in one thing but high in another. It may be low in sugar, but it may be high in fat.
And what about these airline seats, Alex? Does that feel fair? If you have sort of medical equipment, you have to pay for that second seat.
If you need 2 seats on an aircraft, you should pay for 2 seats on an aircraft. That said, I don't believe it is interfering with a private business's ability to operate as it wants to operate.
Yeah.
But it would actually discourage me from flying on an airline that's giving people won't give people who need medical equipment, or people who are taking their their musical instruments because they play in an orchestra, or tall people because people who are think of Mark Dolan at 6'6", probably the tallest person in this.
He's also one of the skinniest people.
Absolutely, that sure is. I'm 6'2" and it's pretty hard in an airline seat. I actually have a friend and his mum. They're both stewards for this airline in question in the States, and I won't repeat the reaction because it would get us taken off the air. We need a bleep to this policy because they think it's daft. So this seems to me that that maybe they'll have a rethink.
What if there's a weight issue? Like if one person weighs as much as 2 people.
Well, of course, in the early days of flying, people had to be weighed. It was like a boxing ring. People had to be weighed.
Croydon Airport used to weigh in.
Yeah, it's just like a boxing match. Absolutely, yeah.
I have to say, I'm quite glad those days are gone. I think they will be in the new year.
As you went through in front of your fellow passengers.
Yeah, blimmin' heck. Right, OK, let's move on. As Rishi Sunak considers restricting social media for the under-16s, is the online world a frivolous pastime or is it our biggest downfall? What are your thoughts? Don't go anywhere, we'll be back in 2.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Dewbs & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified.
I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Very good evening. Fizzy Friday it is, everybody. When you do Jeeves & Co, this is brilliant. We don't get this in the morning.
We don't get this on Britain's Newsroom, do we?
No, it's lovely, isn't it? Matthew and Alex are still with me, which is good. So I want to talk now about whether we should ban or at least minimise the use of social media for under 16. So reports are suggesting there are rumours that ministers are considering plans in the new year which could lead to young people being forced to get their parents' permission to set up social media accounts. I personally thought they already did anyway. A government spokesperson has said, "We do not comment on speculation, but our commitment to making the UK the safest place to be a child online is unwavering, as evidenced by our landmark, some might say utterly oppressive, Online Safety Act." Alex.
It seems bizarre to suggest we need a raft of new activity, having just introduced, on any view, whether you think the Online Safety Act is good or bad, having introduced a really significant wodge of law.
Huge.
Controversial as well,
right?
Yeah.
And lots of people got different views on it, and people are going to have to adapt to it, and the providers are going to have to work out what it means and so forth. Having just introduced that, the idea we're then going to set up a whole new programme, even before you get to the question of whether prohibitions work. Clue, they don't.
Yeah.
It seems to me to be crazy. You should implement the new law, see how it goes.
Yeah. When they talk about we need to keep children safe online, what do they mean, Matt?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, I think at the moment, when you're downloading apps, you have to tick a box saying you're over 13 in most of them.
Yeah.
I agree. I am anti-Big Brother, and I'm pro-free speech. So, you know, I have lots of issues here, and I think you're absolutely right that it's completely daft for the government to be thinking about doing this when they've just had a big tussle and got through
4 years
the online,
that Online
4
Safety
years.
Act was being
So
debated.
I don't, you know, it's. But on the other hand, I don't have kids, so look who's talking. But the issue around online safety, I mean, you know, when I was a kid, you know, the big thing was, could you sneak into a 15 film? And obviously we do have physical checks on people going into the cinema. We have physical checks on people buying a packet of cigarettes. The government's going to make sure, you know, soon 60-year-olds, never mind 16-year-olds, won't be able to buy a packet of fags. But online, all we asked is kids to tick a box saying, are you over 13? And guess what? At 11, they tick the box saying
What is the danger?
Well, I think the dangers are people groom through inappropriate messages, that people share inappropriate content. So actually, a lot of the campaigners, they're talking of Millie Dowler, the foundation set up in her memory, they're actually against this because they think that the onus shouldn't be on the parents to get permission, but should be on the companies, the tech companies making so many billions to put in place processes that protect people, including something called scanning, where they scan images. Now, that's what the campaigners say.
I know. You're just not going to keep kids offline. It's just not realistic, I think, in the modern age. But let me make a different point. The same people who say we should restrict access to the internet for under 16s, by and large, tend to be the same people who say these people should be able to choose their genders and take life-altering amounts of hormonal treatment. It's amazing. You can't choose whether you're going to have any sugar, but you can choose whether you're a boy or a girl. I mean, it's just, we're living in an upside-down world now, where someone will say to somebody, I'm not going to let you have a Facebook account, but I'm going to let you go down the Tavistock and take treatment that will change the rest of your life. I mean, you won't be able to have kids. You know, the reason we don't do that...
Not that many of those, to be fair. There's not that many people being taken down the Tavistock to change their gender.
They are closing the Tavistock.
But it's people who believe that you should be able to do it. I didn't mean the people who are doing it, the people who say it's okay.
The mindset.
Right? And so there's something perverse about that. And the reason that we generally don't do that is that children are bad decision makers. That's why we don't let them vote. That's why we don't let them choose their own bedtimes, and that's why we don't let them choose their own diets, more or less. So I'm quite open to whether or not someone wants to try and control what children access online on the basic principle that we control a lot of what children do. As I say, and I'm not sure it's going to work, but there is this weird hypocrisy going on in British society at the moment where we say, you can't do all these things, but
and
you
yet
can.
We're going to let you be an adult in other situations.
But it only applies in certain areas, as you say. It's a kind of, it's actually, the truth of the matter is it's a kind of sort of slight fear of actual sex, because a lot of this is about people excising what I believe is called adult content.
That is a really good point, actually. I mean, even adults now can't.
Well, that's one of the things.
Access adult content without, and this is part of, I think, which is so controversial with the Online Safety Act, without either facial recognition, that's right, or putting in your bank details or exactly who you are. That's just as an adult to look at adult content, Alex.
And of course,
I think that's outrageous.
The thing about that is that it's only people who are completely down the line, law-abiding, not technologically sophisticated who get caught by that. Because in an age of BitTorrents, dark nets, the ability to go via VPN and access the internet...
I mean visible pants.
No,
VPN.
It's VPN you meant. VPL you didn't mean. Right? In an age that there are people who want to access really, really dark, bad stuff.
That's right.
They'll get it.
They can do it. But people who just want a bit of smut, and by the way, there have been kids sort of looking at naughty magazines since well before the internet existed.
They certainly, they're passed around in every schoolyard in the country since printing,
And I know that Rishi Sunak is alluding to social media here, but I mean, porn is covered in this online safety bill as well. 17-year-old boys who might have a natural procreative urge to indulge in pleasure in the most intimate and private way. The government and corporations are now involved in that activity. Just think about that.
Yes.
And that boy won't go and put his face in and put his bank details in. He will go on the dark web. They will find a way, and then they're going to see awful stuff.
Yeah, if you're going for a job in government where you have to be security cleared, one of the first questions they ask you is, have you ever accessed adult content? And the answer they want is yes, because if you say no, they think they're basically you're lying. So you feel sorry for the very small percentage of people who never have, who say no, and they think they're lying. But it's because we have such hypocrisy about it. And as Alex says, things were passed around in the schoolyard back in my day.
Yeah.
Now it's accessed online. I think we have to have a realistic conversation. Yes, of course, there are some nasty people out there who we need to think about how we protect kids from that, but also we don't want to be in the new Puritanism age, the age of new Puritanism.
Absolutely. The thing is with this suggestion, Alex, that Rishi Sunak might ban social media for the
We love a ban in this country.
They love a ban, don't they? They love a ban.
I'm a bit confused because I thought Rishi Sunak was getting ready for when he's not Prime Minister anymore to go and move to his Malibu house and work for one of the social media giants.
Now,
yes,
he'll be Prime Minister for 1,000 years.
Yes,
outrageous if you suggest that.
Also, bear in mind what this is doing. It's creating... I think it's very clever. If their ambition is to just have everybody organised in a digital data set, and you will have a folder with your name on it, Alex, with all of your information in there, then this is priming children. Well, you can go on to Snapchat, but we're going to need to know who you are. One of the suggestions is that the children will have their faces scanned.
The funny thing about that...
I don't like it.
The funny thing about that is most people love those kinds of suggestions. And certainly if it's going to make their life easier or give even the slightest scintilla of suggestion of a modicum of safety, they'll give up all freedoms, all privacies.
So worrying.
I know.
And say, you go ahead. In fact, a good clutch of people in this country want us to return to COVID.
Yeah, I was about to say,
go back into lockdown.
We should bring
that, my friends, is the perfect note to end it on. My last show of the year. Have a lovely Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. I'm back on New Year's Day at 9:30.
And I'm here on Christmas morning.
Here's Lee Anderson.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. This weekend will be a cloudy and fairly mild one for many of us, and there will be a lot of dry weather around. However, there is an amber rain warning in force for parts of northwest Scotland through much of Saturday and Sunday. That's because we'll see this string of weather fronts bringing some quite relentless rain throughout the weekend. And we'll see some of that rain throughout Friday night. It'll generally be lighter than it is going to become over the weekend, but